Hello there, everybody. Welcome back to the Top Hat Lounge for a very special playoffs preview episode. Tonight, we'll be discussing the results from week number 8. We'll have a bit of a discussion about our playoff teams, including a closer look at those upcoming streamed matches. And of course, we'll be taking a look at the brackets. I'm your host, Crewmann44, joined in the lounge this week by the perfect people to discuss the impending postseason. Everyone, if you could please introduce yourselves with your IGN, what team you're on, what role you play, and share with us one of your favorite memories or experiences from the season of the LXC so far.
Hey everyone, I'm Storm. I'm the mid laner for New Orleans Phoenix. Highlight of the season. I don't know if I've got one like standout one, but this last week we just played against Expired Bandits, and I think it was a really fun 2-0 victory were able to pull. Being able to lane against Dismal or Robust Octopus as his IGN is, was a lot of fun. We've known each other for a while, so it was fun to have that little grunge match.
Very nice. Frost, I believe we have you up next.
Yep, I'm Frost. I am the mid laner for TD Harmony and Arbiter. And I think probably the one highlight we have so far is the fact that we are currently waiting for our final matchup and grand finals of Arbiter playoffs.
Yeah, very exciting. Of course, all the other orgs, or all the other leagues, rather, I should say, are just now getting into the playoffs, but you're, of course, already into the thick of things over there in Arbiter. Last but not least.
I'm Novokaine. I am the support slash jungler for Avalanche. Highlights. I think it was a pretty tough season for us, but I think highlights was just taking away. We learned we had a couple guys who punched up for us this season to help us with some roster changes in real life, and so I think for me it was just having them tag along and stay with us the whole season, even though it was a little discouraging. So, but we all made it through till the end. So.
Fantastic. Yeah, even if you didn't have the best of seasons in terms of your record, still being able to take something away from it, I think, is absolutely fantastic. But guys, let's go ahead and get right into it. So we're going to be starting off, of course, with the Arbiter League. So taking a look at the results from last week, as we can see here, both of these matches went to all 5 games, including that upper bracket final between TD Harmony and Contingent Purple. TD Harmony, of course, able to get the win in the end. So Frost, what would you like to share with us about that match?
Um, I think that with that series, I learned a lot about Contingent in the sense of that they have a lot of grit when they play, and they have a lot of pocket picks that weren't shown to us before. And I think that series also shows that Contingent can kind of keep their head in the game, even though they do drop some maps and they have that mental reset whenever they do go down. Like for example, in game one with them or with us, or not game one, sorry, game two. Game two, we ended up bouncing back after I ended up having a pretty rough performance on the Azir, and they ended up doubling that game. And game two, they ended up we ended up having me get ahead. We ended up winning that game, but then they're able to rebound back immediately game three. And then with me having a really good performance on the Swain, they were still able to pick the fights that they wanted and get us in really bad situations and end up still winning that game throughout. And even though we should have won that game, in my opinion, but I still think that that shows a lot about that team and how they can play from behind and ahead at any point in any given game.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just the fact that the series was so back and forth and clearly was such a close affair, I think is a testament to that, right? We're going to get into some win screens in just a moment here, but is there anything you wanted to add? Perhaps I should come to you, Novocaine. Anything you wanted to mention about that other, of course, playoff match that happened? OSG Tactical Freeze not quite able to get that win over TD Chrono Break.
Yeah, I think that was another back and forth, right? The teams
Hmm.
played well. There were some heartbreakers in there. Talking with the guys, I think it was um, another game that could go either way. You see those 3-2s. That's what you like to see, I guess, when you're back there supporting the org. It means everybody played well through all the games. So, but no, sad to see him not make it. But I think the TD Chrono Break, good for them. Look forward to see how they do as they move on to the next phase. So.
Absolutely. Yeah, that will be exciting to look out for in the future. But going ahead and getting into these win screens that we have from last week, this match that you played, Frost, TD Harmony versus Contingent Purple. You mentioned a little bit that you were having some good performances and some not so good performances. Is there any one of these games in particular, Frost, that you feel like was a really significant inflection point in the series? Any of these games that you really think we should zoom in on and examine with a little bit more detail?
Uh, I think it's hard to say specifically. I think that game 4, with me having a pop-off game on Aurora, was a really big staple in that series because I think that was probably the best game that I had in playoffs up until that point. And I think that is one of those where as soon as you get floored up 2-1, you have to quickly mentally reset and go into game 5. And by that
Mm.
time, you've already played 4 maps. By that time, you've used 100% of your energy. And you have to basically use everything left in the fumes for that final game 5. And I think as soon as we were able to get ahead and cleanly close that, with them not having really much of an answer into it compared to the game 2 and 3, I think we felt really good going into game 5. Game 5 that we could close out the series and have other people be big factors in the win as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this looks like a fantastic performance for you and King Vivi on the Jinx as well. You guys getting it was 13-0 and 10 for you there on the Aurora and 11-2 and 3 for Vivi on the Jinx. So clearly that was a really big win for you guys there in game number 4, and you definitely did, like like you were just saying. I'm sure you took a lot of momentum from that game number 4 into the game 5 that allowed you to end up taking the victory. I was noticing that it looks like Blue Side was undefeated all the way up until that 5th game. Is that something that you were worried about at all, Frost? Is that something that was, that you kind of were keeping in the back of your mind at all, or?
You see, that was something that really surprised me because
Hmm.
I thought that it would come down to a situation where they would end up trying to give their mid counter pick at all costs, just because of how the series went that we played against them in regular season. And as soon as it didn't turn that way and we ended up losing on red side, I think the demeanor of the series completely changed because all of a sudden
Mm,
we have Amumu being a prio pick on both sides because Toxin plays it, Dragon was taking it on B1 as well, such as game 1. So now we have to worry about that in
yeah.
the back of our minds come the later series as we're on red side. So I think that put a lot of pressure on the red side draft to answer with bigger picks than what the B1 was initially. And I think that they had a lot of prio on the Nautilus, they had a lot of prio on the Amumu, they had a lot of prio on these picks that give them guaranteed setup, so they had a go button whenever they hit it.
Yeah, definitely makes a lot of sense. The Amumu is such a pick that, yeah, I feel like is OP in a lot of these amateur leagues. It's just so much value that you can get from that, so much team fighting power from the Amumu's ultimate, right?
It's
I'm
guaranteed setup.
noticing, absolutely, absolutely. I'm noticing in this game 4 as well, Toxin was able to get his hands on the Amumu again here. In game number 3, when you guys were on the red side, you did ban away the Amumu, expecting a Dragon to take it on the B1, right? Like you were just saying. Do you feel like that was an error on the side of Contingent Purple to not ban away that Amumu when they were on the red side in game number 4? How big of an impact do you think that decision had on that game?
I think it's, in my opinion, I've always hated the thought of if you look at these bans, you'll see that Contingent Purple put a lot of focus on me as well, 5 banning me multiple games.
Mm.
And I think that I'll always go by this, and I don't care who it is or who you are. I think that most people have 2 or 3 really, really good champs, and then everything is just slightly below it. And if you can ban out those really good champs and put them on something with less prio, you can always work around that as well. I think some of those bans were rather questionable at times, just because I had them in solo queue and hadn't showed crazy performances on them in LXC. But I'm not one to really criticize the draft a whole lot, so I think that
Okay.
it's hard to say. I think the Amumu ban would have been huge on their side, but I also think the 5 bans was a little questionable in my opinion.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, clearly their effort to target you in the ban phase may have been, limited success, with that. In a couple of these games, you said yourself not quite being able to have as good a performance as you would normally like to have, right? But obviously, in the end, did not really work out for them. I do want to take a look at the game number 5 win screen, of course, as well. This game, it looks like Graguset tried her very best on the Akali, and Neon Sword actually had a great game on that Tristana as well. But Complex coming in and dropping 20 kills on the Darius to close things out for you and the rest of TD Harmony. Anything in particular about this game number 5? Were there any moments that stood out to you, Frost, or anything that you want to reflect on about this game?
I think a mix of their draft and the game was a little questionable in my opinion, because I think that as soon as they showed the Nautilus and the Volley Bear in the first phase, it allowed me to pick the way R3, and any dive that they have just immediately gets negated, in the sense of I have my fear, I have a lot of setup for us to do other things. And it also opened up for the Tark pick as well on R4. So I think that draft is a little questionable because we had really good synergy in the sense of Darius gets Tark ulti, and then he's able to just go off, get his stacks, get his resets, and he can take over game. And the best case scenario happened where he got ahead top lane as well. And I think overall, this game, I think Akali did well in lane. I was borderline useless whenever it came to damage. I just was good utility at the end. And I think that there are things to take away from this game for the other side. It was just unfortunate that Darius got ahead and then never got killed. And then he ended up having 3 items at, I think, 23 minutes or something along those lines.
Yeah. Still did get out damaged by Neon Sword's Tristana in that game, which is kind of crazy. But clearly, yeah, your composition, on paper, it makes a lot of sense. It looks really good to me, and clearly you guys had a plan with it as well. You knew exactly how to execute with this, so I'm sure that is in large part what allowed you to take the victory. Storm and Novokaine, anything you guys would like to ask Frost about in regards to this match? Anything jumping out at you in these win screens that you wanted to touch on?
I mean, they went pretty into good detail on a lot of these. The only thing I would say I was a little surprised by was the Azir pick. I don't know if it's just like a thing you've been playing in solo queue that you thought looked good in the situation.
Azir's a pick that we have played before whenever we played it in Titan as well, in Titan Gladiator, and I had a lot of success on it. So it was a pick that we have played in scrims and in officials and multiple times, and we have looked really good on it before. But I think a little bit of miscommunication led into losing that game because I wasn't able to get to a point where I could be a real champion before we started taking all these risky fights and just coin flipping the game. So I just think it's a little bit of team miscommunication. I think that's something that we kind of wrote home about after the series as well.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's the one that was kind of just looking at the draft. I go, where does Azir fit here?
Yeah.
We were playing Nocturne Cassandra, and we're like, Azir.
I also think my assignment was completely different than what it should have been because it felt like that entire series. It just felt like whoever engaged first lost it. And I think truth is, the more uptime I get myself on Azir, the better off I probably am in that.
True.
Yeah, everybody wants to go for the faker highlight play, right? But sometimes on the Azir, you just need to stand there and hit people with soldiers. This can be really tough to know, because obviously both are good, right? You just need to know which is more important in any given situation. So
yeah, and I think I tried too hard to make too many plays happen, which led to me misplaying some plays, which led to the downfall of that because Tristana never got touched in fights, and she was able to 1v9.
Makes sense. Definitely could see how that would happen. Novokaine, anything you wanted to touch on or ask Frost about this match?
I just really like the Darius pick in that game 5. I think especially in the enemy team comp, everybody's coming at him right. He's gonna have a better chance of staying in there and putting passive on a lot of people. So I think hats off on that final draft. And I would also agree. I think sometimes 5-man banning, you do have to look at the utility pieces that go in there that others can play. And I think I would have liked to have seen that in Moo banned just for that reason alone. It brings a lot of utility that, to the point Frost already made, that 4th or 5th champ isn't going to probably have enough edge over someone who's played a Moo and could just set up those team fights in a little more perfect way for you. So
yeah, definitely. Frost, I assume the Darius pick in game 5 was the R5 pick in the last slot there. Yeah, definitely very very smart. And Darius didn't have any presence in the match up until that point, right? So I'm sure Contingent Purple didn't necessarily see that one coming.
It's also a pocket pick for Complex, so as we offered it to him, we were really confident with him being able to get ahead in that because he's played that matchup several times before, and it is one of his most comfortable champs. So
yeah, well, definitely, I think that that all makes sense. We can see that reflected in the win screen there as well. But let's go ahead and move on now, guys. We do have our streamed match in Arbiter for this upcoming week, happening tomorrow night, of course. Going to be Jolly Rogers Black Pearl versus TD Chrono Break down here in the lower bracket. And Frost, of course, you're going to have a couple of weeks off now. You're just
Mhm.
waiting over there in the grand finals to see who is going to be meeting you. What are your thoughts on these two teams? Taking a look at this stat sheet, what do you really feel like is worth highlighting for us? What are your expectations in regards to this matchup we're about to see?
For this series, since I've played both sides, I kind of think this will be a close series. And I know that's going to surprise a lot of people when I say that as well. But I think Black Pearl has improved their drafts tenfold to the point where they know what they want to do coming to draft and they know what works for them. And I think if Chrono Break doesn't know the answer into their style, I think it could lead to them just falling behind early and then ended up not just being surprised by their wombo combo style that they have, and it could get really messy for them and drop a map or two. I think another thing that worries me about Chrono as well is anytime they have lost map one so far this season, they have not won the series. That's something
Interesting.
that's really worried to keep a hold of because it seems like that also in that best of five they played, they went up 2-0, then lost two straight. So it's possible that mentality, the mental state for this team, the mentality they have after losses isn't that great, and they're not able to bounce back as easily. So I think if Black Pearl can take a map, it can get to be really interesting in that series, whether it goes 5 or even Black Pearl upsets them. I don't know.
So do you have maybe we'll get into predictions later after we discuss the teams a little bit more. But coming over to you, Novokaine, obviously your team was taken down by Chrono Break last week, even though it was a very close affair. How do you feel about Chrono Break's odds going up against JR Black Pearl in this one? Is there anything in particular on this stat sheet that you feel like is worth mentioning?
I think the thing I look at is the average game time for both teams, right? They're both at 35 minutes, which means that even though Black Pearl may be lower on the totem pole, they're able to hang into those games, right? And especially as those games start to go on, sometimes it just takes one fight to flip that, and you can turn that win around. So I think it just shows their fortitude to hang in there, and that they've had some tough games. And then I look at Dragons killed, right? They're on par with TD Chrono Break. So especially as those games go on, you're able to grab those dragons. Those are extra stats that can sometimes push those games. So I think for me, it'll just be watching, that, as Frost said, are they going to be able to continue to capitalize on their draft strategy, maybe find something and be able to drag those games out to a point they can win? And if they can, are they going to be able to push Chrono Break? I think the rest of the stats, you look at it, it goes in Chrono's favor. But sometimes mental can be a big part of that game. And so if you can win some of those first early battles or maybe cause a little bit of doubt to creep into your opponent's mind, that can really weigh in on those other games.
Do you agree with what Frost was saying as well about he was kind of hypothesizing that Chrono Break might be especially susceptible to those kind of mental derailments, I guess you could say?
I think we all can be, right? So I think that's
True.
definitely some warfare you got to take. And especially if you can sneak a fight off late, like if you're winning the game early and then you lose on the back of a dragon fight that gets flipped and then the enemy team goes to Baron and then stomps it down your throat, right? Those can be really hard to come back from.
Yeah.
And like I said, when you look at that average game time the Dragon's taken, like it shows that Jolly Roger can hang in there and be at those fights. And so I know from being a player myself, you've had one of those fights happen to you and it flips and it drags over into the next game because you only got 5 minutes to digest it, and then you really have to pull that back in so it doesn't snowball out of control for you in the games to follow. So definitely something to watch for
Absolutely.
there.
Yeah, it's like the gameplay of League of Legends is one thing, but being able to manage your own mental state is almost like an entirely different skill, right? That people do need to practice and improve on. But Storm, how about you for this stat sheet, or anything about these teams that you feel like you'd like to add to the conversation?
Looking at this, there's definitely something that's wrong somewhere. I don't know what. Because like creep score a minute is it's wrong. I just don't know where it's wrong at.
Hmm.
Some rounding errors maybe, but on average,
Oh yeah,
Black Pearl actually is up a gold on where Chrono Break is, and they're playing the same game times.
true.
So I think that's an important thing to keep track of because, like, especially in a lot of these like more hectic games, if you're just up gold, though, there's a lot of fights you'll just flip by just outstatting people because like we're not gonna like see some like masterful, like no one's Yasuo keyblading somebody in these games.
Probably
So
not.
like just the fact Jolly Rogers tends to like out farm Chrono Break by the looks of it, or they're playing at more aggressive lanes, being able to like leak plates off turrets, I think can make it so that they have like a surprisingly strong mid game that Chrono Break might not be expecting to have to deal with, which I think could lead to them like leaking out some wins and even maybe flipping the series if it like kind of mental brooms Chrono Break.
Sounds like we're all expecting this one to be pretty close, and everybody kind of also expecting the mental to play a big role in this series. I do want to also point out, of course, the all-important vision stat. As the side of TD Chrono Break do have significantly higher team vision per minute, so that could come into play as well. But let's go ahead and take a look now at the playoff bracket. So this is, of course, the lower bracket that we're going to be taking a look at here. JR Black Pearl versus TD Chrono Break right there, the matchup for this week that we were just previewing. Let's get some predictions now. Storm, what are your thoughts? Which way do you think this one's going to end up breaking?
I think Chrono Break will still come out and win. I mean, they've just had the stronger season so far. Don't get me wrong, I think Black Pearl's on the come up, and so I think that it'll go at least 4 games. I think it's definitely can go either way, but you just kind of I'm the type of person that I favor history, and
Yeah.
Chrono Break's already proven they can beat this team. I don't see how adding more games is going to change that outcome.
Think it's going to be another 5-gamer, though? 3-2 TD Chrono Break?
I hope not. Stuff is exhausting to watch.
Well, I still need the prediction from you, though, Storm. What's the game score?
Oh, I think it'll be 3-1 Chrono Break.
Okay. Yeah, Jolly Rogers Black Pearl definitely been improving, right? But the question is, have they improved enough? Frost, what are your thoughts? What's your prediction for this series? Who do you think's gonna be moving on to face Contingent Purple in that lower bracket final?
I sat on this for a little bit because I was trying to think of the win cons that each side had coming into this series, and I think that there's a couple more win cons on Chrono Break than there is on Jolly Rogers. And that's not a shot at the Jolly Rogers players, it's just more of Chrono Break has shown that they can work really well with their mid jungle duo. I think Razor's Bardo is a really strong duo that if they get ahead, they can take over a game. But if they fall behind, those mental lapses happen. And then all of a sudden, a series can be full blown flipped. And with this, I think I'm gonna have to lean Chrono Break in 5. I think that it all takes is a couple of games of Barda going off or a couple of games of Razors going off on these pocket picks that they have, and then they can just pull out a third game just in game 5 with some crazy magic.
All right. Yeah, very exciting. Very exciting. I mean, I feel like it's almost hard not to predict the full 5 games given what happened in this most recent round of the playoffs, right? It seems like that's mostly what we've been seeing here in Arbiter. But Novokaine, of course, we still need a prediction from you as well. Are you going to make it a full lounge prediction for TD Chrono Break? Where's your head at?
I am. I think it's 5 games. I think Jolly Rogers will give them. I think it'll be a tough 5 games, and it's one that'll be a slog. But I think Chrono Break, to Frost's point, has a few more ways that they can maybe work that out or have some flexibility around what that win con is to push through it. And so I'm gonna go 3-2 Chrono Break.
Sounds good. Sounds good. Frost, I want to give you the last word here on Arbiter. Anything else you wanted to touch on? Anything else you wanted to mention concerning the Arbiter League?
Uh, Not that I know of. I mean, I'm just gonna be watching the next couple of weeks of games, seeing who we play next. But outside of that, it should be fun because I think that there is a very real argument for the next 3 series to all go 5. So
Yeah. I mean, in case we don't talk to you again before we do get into those grand finals, do you think Contingent Purple is going to be able to make it there to get their rematch against you, or who do you think is going to be making it into the finals with you?
I'm right now leaning Contingent. We're gonna face Contingent in finals, but I think a lot of it's gonna be dictated off what we see tomorrow by Chrono Break and Jolly Rogers. I think if Chrono Break make it through and they look really convincing, I think that's one of those where maybe they end up going back and it's a different story because they have that losers bracket run that they've started and
Yeah.
stuff along those lines where maybe Razors is more comfortable with certain champions against whether it's Drakenrich or Gragasset. It's hard to say in that sense, but I think that if Chrono Break ends up having a really strong series against Jolly Rogers, there could be an argument to have them beating Contingent next week.
Will be exciting to wait and see what ends up happening there. Frost, I believe you said you also have a scrim later on tonight or something
Yeah,
of
I
that
do.
nature. Well, let's go ahead and give you your shout outs now, just in case.
Shout out my team, shout out my coach, Rainey, the Harmony Boys. I appreciate Fish for having me on. Thank you all. I think that's about it. Appreciate you all and hope you all have a good one.
Perfect. Yeah. And Frost, feel free to hang out here as long as you'd like with us in the lounge. But whenever you do need to go for that
All right,
scrim,
sounds good.
feel free to head out. Yes. Let's go ahead now and move on to the Sentinel League. So taking a look at these Week 8 results from the Sentinel League, we don't have a representative here from Sentinel this week. You know, Novokaine, of course, you do have a couple of teams. Or were you playing in Sentinel this season?
I do play in
Which
Sentinel. Yep,
Ah,
I'll be
Avalanche
for
is
this
the
one.
Sentinel team. Okay,
Yep.
perfect. So let's see. There's the A OSG Avalanche. You did unfortunately have to. It looks like FF your match against the Plasma Wolves. Actually, what happened there, Novocaine?
Real life got in the way, right? And I think originally this has been scheduled as a bye week for us, so some work travel had
Mm,
to happen. Then Plasma Wolves was able to get their roster back together, and this season's been kind of tough. We had a solid group that played in Arbiter last year, and then about 2 weeks out from season start, we had real life get in the way, so we've kind of been pushing in and out. So that was tough. We tried. We had some. I'll give a shout out to Tactical Feed. They're in the Arbiter group. They've punched up and helped us a few nights just to make sure that we can keep the roster flowing. So thanks to Feldroth and Billy there for doing that. But yeah, tough week. Not how you like to end the season. I'll
mhm,
be truthful. I don't see that score being different, even if we played the game.
mhm.
Been kind of tough. I think we're good for about 12 to 15 minutes these days, and then things kind of fall apart as we get into mid to late games. So we're working through that. But I think Plasma Wolves probably still take that 2-0. Not trying to throw shade at my guys, but just also being realistic with how the season's gone for us.
Absolutely. No, I appreciate your honesty there, Novocaine. And pesky real life always getting in the way. Definitely
It
pretty
does.
unfortunate there. But are there any other results from this past week, Novocaine, that you would like to highlight? Anything that you find surprising here or especially interesting?
I when I look at like the Brom Lives RAR game, I was hoping for a little bit different there. I think that was one that I think as we're going into the season, I kind of been watching them for playoffs. And then our guys, that was a drop going into the last week. You don't like to see that as you're getting ready for playoffs, right? It can be a little bit too rally again. We throw that word mental out. It exists a lot for us league players. So making sure
Hmm.
everybody's rallied back around and ready for that as we walk into playoffs. So
Yeah, pretty unfortunate for that other OSG team. I believe Dropping Point Hellfire is another
yep.
squad that had really been struggling this season, right? So I'm sure that would have been a match that the other OSG squad would have loved to take the win in, but not quite able to make it happen there either. Let's go ahead and move on now. We do have our win screens from actually this that match between Dropping Point Hellfire and OSG Sub-Zero. So taking a look at the win screen from game number 1, 31 minutes in this one. Dropping Point Hellfire looks like Fifi there had an exceptional game on the Jarvan. The Jarvan Oriana combo definitely can be a very strong one. And looks like that was the big difference. That sort of mid jungle for DP Hellfire
Yep.
ended up what was really instrumental in getting them this game 1 victory. Anything in particular that you want to highlight here, Novocaine?
Um, I like the bot lane pick, and I think for folks who've been watching, Cheese has kind of moved roles on this season, right? Was top lane. I know he moved bot. There's some questions there, but I think Cheese really does well in the ADC role. So like seeing him on the Kaisa. I like the draft with the Maokai. That's pretty comfortable for Dorsky. Um, and as you called out, Fifi had a good game in the jungle, and I think there's just some execution there. Draft wise, I'm okay with it. But I think there's some execution things they'd like back from talking with those guys after the game. But again, nice work for Hellfire there to um, really pick that game apart and exercise their strengths there to get rolling through jungle and mid.
Yeah, absolutely. I do have our other guests here are both mid laners, so I want to get them to chime in here as well. Coming to you first, Frost. If you were the Syndra in this game, as you're loading onto the Rift, how scared are you playing against what DP Hellfire had in this draft? Obviously, I'm not really sure when the Syndra was locked in. I don't know what information OSG had when they did decide to go for that mid pick, but just given the drafts, what would be kind of your thoughts heading into this one?
Well, good luck anytime you don't have flash. That's all I'll say.
Hmm.
As soon as your flash is gone, they have Renekton, they have Jarvan, they have Orianna, and they have Rell. Even when you do have flash, there's no guarantee you're still surviving that because all it takes is one Orianna ball and you're just deleted. I think this draft's really hard because I personally am not a fan of having double damage types in mid jungle, and I see Mordekaiser Syndra here. I'm not I'm not saying it's always wrong in that sense, but I've always been a big fan of having different damage types that way that they can't just pivot like defensive boots against you if they're behind or if they're even in that sense. and it have really good value. So, and also against Syndra, Merc Treads is a really good purchase as well. So, it kind of gives you double value in that sense. But yeah, as Syndra in this game, I just don't see how you play this at all.
Yeah, pretty tough one. Definitely is a very magic heavy composition for the side of OSG Sub-Zero. Although to be fair, it's not like the side of DP Hellfire ended up stacking an insane amount of magic resist or anything like that either. So, I'm sure that comfort played a role in a lot of these picks as well. We were just hearing about how the Maokai is a big pick for Dorsky. But yeah, obviously not really working out for OSG in the end. And Storm, actually, I'm going to have you chime in on this game number 2 win screen here. Let's go ahead and move on to this second game. So it looks like Fifi was on the Viego this time around. Grayson, the mid laner for Hellfire, was on the Lissandra. On the other side, Mundo Man decided to bust out the Silas. Does look like Mundo Man was able to play the game a little bit more here in this second one. What's immediately jumping out at you, Storm, in these wins in this second win screen?
I think this OSG draft, obviously, I don't know much about these teams, like, inherently. If your team hasn't been streamed and I haven't casted for your Crusader match or Sentinel match, I'm not going to have seen you play most times. But I think this is a really interesting draft due to the fact you're actually just forcing 4 melees with Sedge, and I honestly don't hate it. I
I was gonna
think
talk.
this is like super run you over if this team comp gets ahead. The like one crutch that makes this comp really hard to execute is 2 picks in Hellfire's draft. It's Lissandra and it's Mordekaiser. Lissandra just has the ability to make so much space for this dropping point team with Caitlyn and Viego being able to look for like small little tick damage engages to like just get resets moving. So I think this Lissandra pick, obviously I don't know the pick orders that this all happened in, but Lissandra's a very good pick to shut down a lot of what's going on here.
Absolutely.
And then the Mordekaiser, just if any one of these champs like ever dives and they go too far, the scoreline doesn't show it, but Mordekaiser absolutely beats the brakes off of Camille in lane. Obviously, maybe there's some jungle intervention. That's why Mordekaiser fell behind in this game. I don't know. But, like, Kayn can't play the game. Yasuo can't go in and try to hit big man combos. A lot of this team comp relies around Sedge perma-stunning people over and over with multiple melees. You can just rip the Sedge out, and now they have no CC. So this looks like Dropping Point just somehow drafted the Exodia comp against this comp. And that's super unfortunate because I think the Sub-Zero comp would have been fun to like actually be able to sit and watch it play out.
Totally. As for Sub-Zero, it feels like a very cohesive draft, right? Clearly they knew what they were trying to go for. Everybody's diving in and you're making these chaotic fights happen. But I completely agree, Storm. It's like DP Hellfire had the perfect draft into it. I do have the draft here. I'm taking a look at it right now. So for OSG Sub-Zero, their 1-2 on the red side was Yasuo Sejuani. And then DP Hellfire immediately responded with the Lissandra Viego combo on the 2-3. So I do feel like we got to be a little bit critical of Sub-Zero sticking with the game plan from that position, drafting 3 more melees into Lissandra Viego, maybe a little bit suboptimal. But Novokaine, or who was that? Was that Novokaine
Yeah,
or
that was
Frost?
me. Yeah,
Frost,
I think looking back at this draft, all of it paints a lot clearer of a picture now. Because with Yasuo Sejuani, first of all, I'm going to say with that, I'm honestly a huge fan of Yasuo Sejuani bot lane. It's something that I played with the team before last split. We had a lot of success on it, and the idea behind it makes a lot of sense. And I think that that's a very strong bot lane if you know how to play it. And I like that a lot. However, I think in this draft, I think the Yasuo originally is originally used as a flex, or maybe they already had it planned for bot lane because they already picked the Sejuani with it. But I think DP's thought was pick Lissandra because Yasuo is going mid. They probably think there's no way that's going bot lane, and they just wanted a good lane matchup into it. And I think in the sense of, yeah, it stops their comp, but that's probably why the Lissandra was locked in as well, because they probably thought it was going to be Yasuo mid, and they're comfortable with that in that sense. So I think avoiding that matchup was really good by Sub-Zero because they just put their mid on a very comfortable matchup, I'm assuming. And then Silas is able to play the game pretty well, which allowed him to versus the Syndra game, where he may have not been able to because of all the other setup that was there.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. Novocaine, coming to you, of course. Now, what is there anything you'd like to respond to, or any insights you can share with us about what Sub-Zero's game plan was, maybe heading into the second game?
Yeah, so in game one, I know there was some concern over the Mordekaiser pick, and that's why it got picked early, then it got flexed to jungle because they didn't like how it went. And a little surprised here that if the draft went 1-2 slam Viego Lissandra, we didn't consider taking that. If we had that concern in game one, it still lines up nicely with what you want to do with Dorsky on the Sejuani, right? And it gives you the ability to remove a problem child for yourself in those fights. So that's a question I had. Just I don't understand why, if it was still up, then we don't take it, or how that happens. I do like the combo from Cheese Dorsky. I'll be honest. I think that was just originally slammed that way as bot lane, no flex option. There's some other choices that Cheese likes to play down there that he does really well. Those melee into ranged matchups in the bot lane, and him and Dorsky have a lot of experience on that. And in our in houses, they like to beat up on us with it.
Yeah.
So there's some things there that I think are good. The Silas pick I do like. I think there's some nice ultimates here you can take. I don't like seeing that we left Mort on the table for him, knowing what we wanted to do.
Yeah. The fact that Mordekaiser got all the way into that second phase as well, it's
Mhm.
pretty surprising because that was definitely, obviously, as we've discussed, a great pick into what Sub-Zero had in this game as well. But I think we could go ahead and move on now to our final standings here in the Sentinel League. Taking a look, we have OSG Sub-Zero, of course. Take a look at Sector 1 first. I had it backwards. Hang on. There we go. OSG Avalanche, your squad, Novocaine, unfortunately only able to pick up the one win this season. But anything you'd like to reflect on in regards to these standings, or any teams in Sector 1 that you feel like we really need to be looking out for moving into the playoffs?
I'm gonna be watching Rivals. Um, I I'd like to see how they make this run there. I think NLE is really strong as we go into here. I would consider them, the best out of our side, but I do like Rivals. Um, we'll see the rest of the run they make. Um, Plasma Wolves will be interesting. We'll see how they go, right? But those are two I'm watching from our sector, Rivals and Choppas.
Fantastic. Let's take a quick look at Sector 2 as well. The OSG squad over here fared much better, despite taking the 0-2 loss there in week number 8. They did finish with a 5-3 record, as comfortably in playoff position. That I guess they do have the head-to-head over Roar. I assume that's why they're in second, ahead of Roar. Just got confirmation that is indeed the case. So Novocaine, besides Sub-Zero, obviously the Bunny Brawlers up there, the undefeated 8-0 final record. But any thoughts you have about this second sector of standings?
I Like I said, I was watching Braum Lives Matter. I kind of wonder there if Roar and them couldn't be in a similar situation where they're 4-4. Um, I also worry a little bit that maybe we looked too far ahead because we thought, hey, Hellfire's down here at the bottom. We can maybe try some things out. So I
Mm.
worry about us as we go into this next split. Were we looking too far ahead? Do we have that reconciled and we're ready to take the game that's in front of us and not step weeks in advance? So I think it'll be important to see how we do there. Bunny Brawlers have looked good, but again, it's any given Sunday. We're talking longer series is here, right? We're talking games that could maybe flip on their head. So I think in the playoffs, it's a fresh set. You've got to see everybody. What's your game plan? How's your draft going to look? Do you have your draft short up? And can some of these guys be contenders in here? Because I think 2, 3, and 4 are pretty close. Bunny's
Mm.
obviously set kind of head and shoulders above everybody else.
Yeah, I mean the fact that Sub-Zero was able to get that second place spot means they are going to have a bye through the
Mhm.
play-ins phase of the playoffs. So they're going to be waiting for their opponent. They're not going to be playing this week. But it'll be interesting to see, who does end up being their opponent. And it's important to take every opponent seriously, right? Like you were just saying, Novocaine. So definitely, I'm sure that was a good wake-up call for Sub-Zero, and hopefully they have all the tools that they need moving into this postseason. But taking a look at our play-ins matchups now, the first round of the playoffs here in Sentinel, it's going to be TD Blessed going up against Braum Lives Matter, and then we're going to have the Plasma Wolves up against New Origin Veracity. So let's come to you, Storm. Any thoughts on either of these matchups? Any predictions you may have for us?
I think it's gonna be a pretty back and forth series, all things considering. Like Plasma Wolves, I don't know who they're rostering as their support right now, as it's still blank, but there's 3 subs. Um, but I know Veracity is definitely looking at mixing some drafts up, playing around with a little bit of different picks. I was doing a little bit of drafting help with them for the last couple weeks, and it's getting better. It's improving, but Plasma Wolves, a lot of these core members have shown to be legitimately strong Sentinel players. Um, so I don't want to sell anybody out yet. I think it'll be a fun match to watch. TD Blessed and Braum Lives Matter. Normally, under different circumstances, I would have said I think Braum Lives Matter just sweeps us. I don't think TD takes the game. But after what happened in the RAR series, I've got a little bit more faith in Riven and Complex to be able to kind of eke this one out and make for a at least interesting first week for plans.
All right. Yeah, we'll see. It definitely will be interesting. We'll take a quick look now at the second round as well, as I did misspeak a little bit earlier, saying that OSG Sub-Zero didn't know their quarterfinals opponent just yet. That is not true. We can in fact see here that they are going to be going up against the rivals. And you were just saying earlier on, Novokaine, that you were looking out for the rivals as maybe being one of the big teams to look out for here in Sentinel. So that's definitely a tough quarterfinals opponent for the Sub-Zero boys. What are your thoughts about that matchup in particular?
Well, hopefully they don't try to remove me from the organization since I do own it. But I'm actually going to take Rivals 3-2 here. I think with the lineup, what we've seen, um, I'm going to go 3-2. I do think we have the tools to beat them. I will say that. I think draft will be very important. And then, as we talked about, just making sure our execution of those drafts are done well. I think the tools are there to beat them, but Rivals is a pretty tough opponent going into that matchup.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. We do see, the bookending our quarterfinals here. NLE Choppers there are going to be going up against the winner of TD Plest versus Brom Lives Matter. And down there at the bottom, the Bunny Brawlers are going to be facing off against the winner of New Origin Veracity versus the Plasma Wolves. Any other matchups here, Frost? Anything jumping out at you? Any of these matchups that you wanted to touch on at all? Or any thoughts that you have about this bracket in Sentinel?
Uh, I haven't kept up with Sentinel a whole lot since midway through the season, where I think Blessed was 4-1 is among those lines. So I think seeing Blessed 4-4 now kind of worries me a little bit
Hmm.
because I think that may be a situation where maybe things just aren't working. I'm not 100% certain, or maybe teams have cracked the code against them. But I think that, I mean, it's playoffs time, so if they're not able to win here, their season's done, and they've been losing out. So I'm kind of worried about this team, and I think that if they just got to show a strong showing if they want to show that they're one of the better teams in Sentinel.
Yeah, that is pretty concerning for TD Blessed if they, the last 3 weeks of the regular season for them all ended in losses. That is like anti-momentum going into the postseason. So hopefully they will be able to turn things around. Storm, I believe you were just saying earlier that you're still expecting them to be able to eke out that win over BLM, right?
Yeah, I mean, these last couple weeks have kind of made Brom lives, and I'm giving a lot of like props to these teams as I was definitely a little bit more invested in Sentinel last split than I was this split. So seeing a lot of these names returning and just knowing the organizations on their highs from last split, because I want to say TD Blessed was
Finalists,
semi-finalist or finalist for last
finalists, yeah,
split,
they were finalists.
and then Brom Lives Matter was a semi-finalist as well, if I remember, or at
Wow.
least close to it. So seeing both these teams looking kind of human in playoffs or in regular season and towards the end, I think is a little concerning. But a lot of these players have experience playing in playoffs, where I think they'll be not as shook up as some of these newer teams that have maybe haven't had to play with these kind of stakes like on the line.
Interesting. Yeah, the experience could be coming into play. Regardless of who wins that play-ins match, though, going up against the Choppas, definitely going to be a tough matchup. So we'll see what ends up happening there. Let's go ahead and move on. Now we have some stats for our streamed match. Our streamed play-in best of 3 for Sentinel this week is going to be this match between TD Blessed and Braum Lives Matter. Anything here on the stat sheet, Storm, that you feel like is worth mentioning?
I think KD is a big thing. Obviously, they've played 4 less games than Braum Lives have, but averaging a 3.69 out of 16 games, because you have to keep in mind, not all these are going to be wins, is pretty impressive that they've still kept it over 2. That means when they're losing, at least like it's not like people are just sprinting it down trying to force the bad plays. So I think that gives them a good opportunity into Braum Lives, who seem to be not doing as hot in that regard, where they're playing a lot more lopsided games where when they're falling behind, they're just over aggressing trying to fix the problem and end up like digging the hole just a little bit deeper.
Mm.
So I'm really hoping TD in these games, if they fall behind early, could just take their foot off the gas a little bit and reel it in and let the game come to them instead of trying to force the game.
Yeah. Kind of circles back to the conversation we were having earlier about mental as well. Novocaine, anything especially interesting here for you, or anything you wanted to
No,
jump
Storm
off
hit
of?
on it. I think KDA's
Mm.
jumped out to me. You're also looking game times are a little longer for TD Bless than Braum Lives Matter as well, so they're able to maintain that. I mean, we're talking a minute, but some of those games may be longer, right? So to Storm's points, they don't have anybody running it down. They're keeping it there. You look at the stats. They're taking towers. They're getting dragons. They utilize a lot of barons too, right? 12 barons to get through
Yeah,
there, so they're able to close those games out. So I think Blessed has this here, in my opinion. But
absolutely makes sense. Frost, anything you'd like to add?
Uh, I mean, they pretty much just hit it right in the head. So
Yeah.
I don't have anything to say.
Yeah, TD Blessed, we feel like, has been just a little bit more consistent. That's going to give them the edge in terms of the predictions. You guys, anybody want to tack a score onto there? Are we expecting everybody expecting a 2-0? Anybody expecting BLM to take a game?
I think it's gonna be 2-0 TD Blessed. I've played with Riven in Flex Q games, just messing around, and he's always been a pretty solid player. And I think especially like in this bracket of LXC, I think he's more than comfortable playing into most of these mid laners, so he's able to have enough of an impact, take over some of these games.
Makes sense. Novocaine, you expecting 2-0 for Blessed as well?
2-0 for Blessed. That's how I view it.
Frost, we completing the 2-0 predictions?
I'm gonna have to say 2-1 here.
Oh,
And
okay.
once again, I still have to send it back of my mind with how Blessed has been playing these last few weeks. And
Yeah.
it still scares me a little bit because I know this team can be really good. However, they just haven't been able to find their stride the last few weeks. They had a really good win against TFF Chill Guys, and then ever since then, they've been trying to find their identity. So
Hmm.
I think that if they find it here, I think it's going to be a 2-0. But right now, I'm going to have to go with 2-1.
All right. Well, we'll see if Braum Lives Matter can make the upset happen. But I want to give you, Novocaine, the last word here on Sentinel. Obviously, you're not, unfortunately, going to be able to participate in the playoffs this season, but any other thoughts that you have or anything you'd like to reflect on about Sentinel, about your experience this season?
Just like to thank, one, my squad, the guys that jumped in and helped us and made sure the rosters kept going. I think that was great. Built a lot through here. This was our second season, I guess. We really grew. We went from 1 team to 5 across all the LXC stuff this season. So definitely a lot of learning, a lot of growing. So happy to see Sub-Zero make the playoffs, see the run they make. But then also just thanks to all the guys we played against that generally had good matchups with everyone. I will say it was a nice season. So thanks to all the teams out there. I know we were kind of the punching bag this season, I guess. So I'm hoping to come around and turn that around for next split. But thanks to everybody for being great opponents.
Fantastic, Novocaine. Yeah, hopefully that would be a really cool story if you can turn that around for next split, and then suddenly, you have that crazy growth arc happening. That would be super cool for sure. But very happy to hear as well that you're very gracious in defeat. So very wholesome to hear from you, Novocaine. Let's go ahead and move on now to the Crusader League. So Storm, I believe you may have touched on this a little bit earlier already, but yet another 2-0 for you here in the rest of the squad as you took it over the Uncaged Bandits this time around. Although, and we're going to be getting into this a little bit later, I believe your undefeated record has retroactively been tarnished, right?
Yeah, so I'll give everyone the TLDR on what happened. Obviously, Crusader chat kind of burned for a good like 24 hours. Long story short, NOP's Phoenix, my team, our jungler Feldy had his normal account and his alternate account registered. They've both been on the dock this entire time. When he registered, he should have been marked as solo queue warrior, and he wasn't, so no one thought about it. So when we added Macro Beast as a sub, he was our second solo queue warrior because we didn't know Feldy was supposed to be marked because I didn't check the League of Graphs on his gold 4 negative win rate account to know he like hit D3 8 LP for 7 minutes a year ago. So he ended up getting denied in a different league. Some tickets were made, and then some false information was said. In reality, it was just a clerical error that just no one caught until now. So our one win against Bloom was reversed due to the fact that was the one week we did play with Macro when we had 3 solo queue warriors on the roster.
Right.
Bloom, I will give you $5. Please give me my win back, 'cause it's funny. But in reality, it doesn't change seeding, so it doesn't really matter. The one thing I will say about it, some things should be left in leader chat. Like, that's the whole premise of leader chat. If there's arguments, if there's debates, there's controversial opinions, they should be dealt with leaders and with admins. If you can put in your ticket, you can raise your concern over your problem. At the end of the day, this is not your league. You're not the one who has to reap the repercussion of a ruling. It's the same. The most you can do is put your ticket in. If the admin agrees with you, they agree with you. If they don't, they don't. If this had been an alternate account that was hidden and something, I would understand like people freaking out and burning Crusader chat in the roster and the admins over it, or like there not being like a severe punishment. But like someone forgot to highlight someone's name. Like this isn't that big of a deal.
Not that deep.
Sadly, this did cause a lot of turmoil with a lot of different people, which has now led to some suspensions, some bans from the Discord. So we're going to see a couple teams come into playoffs with slightly alternate rosters, but all I can say is we've dealt with it. It's been addressed. Can we please just play the game? Stop just trying to rulebook everyone because it's funner to rulebook than just beat someone in the game. I don't know.
Totally. I'm glad you were able to get that off your chest, Storm. Yeah, I think the angry mob, in my experience, is not necessarily the best for achieving justice. So, going through the proper channels and doing things the right way, very, very important. And yeah, there do have to be consequences sometimes for people who do cross those lines, who do take things a little bit too far. So, unfortunate the way everything worked out there, but seems like we have sort of corrected everything that needs to be corrected, and we can now get back to, as you say, Storm, playing the video game. So, anything you'd like to reflect on about this matchup that happened last week that you were able to win over the Bandits, and then any other matchups, any other results here that you feel like are going to be important to highlight for us?
In our matchups, I think we kind of exposed them a little bit. Obviously, I think dropping Siphon from the roster over whatever the turmoil of the reasons of why it happened was, I don't want to call it a mistake, but it was definitely a choice. Obviously, I know Med and Robust have played together before, but obviously he's not actively playing the game that much. So I feel like this was kind of a unfortunate timing just to randomly get called on. So it's not really on him. But I think everyone at one point in these games kind of had their standout moment. Shout out Naysire in his comment, gave me the MVP. The only reason I got MVP is because he didn't watch the games and didn't watch me sprint it down the first 8 minutes of both games because I just was delusional flashing forward on repeat because limit testing. I don't know, but yeah, no, I think everyone played really well. For the most part, no one was like allergically the reason that anyone lost. Shout out Ramen. That man is devious on Blitzcrank. I wish I would have uploaded the clip for Vish of him just mind gaming the hell out of Talia, but it was quite a game.
Maybe if we have time
The
later, we get to it.
maybe. The other, honestly, every result in this week surprised me.
Yeah.
PSN 2-0ing NOI, nuts. I did not think that was going to happen. Don't get me wrong, I think PSN's a really good team, but I feel like the key members on NOI that normally step up and put that team on their back were trying their hardest, and it just did not work. Goon Squad also going 2-0 to Syndicate.
Yeah, it was a rough week for New Origin. Besides
What are
your
we
own
doing?
squad.
What are we doing? Don't get me wrong, Syndicate, strong team. Not saying they're bad.
Okay.
Please stop playing Cho'Gath mid. It has been nerfed to oblivion.
Not saying.
Stop doing it.
Mm,
And then,
yeah.
I mean, the rest of these are, there's 3 FFs, so like those don't
Mhm.
matter. And then Bloom against OSG. I mean, Bloom on the come up. This is, not to dog on OSG, but this Bloom roster is like good. I don't want to say I'm worried about the fact I think we're gonna play them after play-ins, but I am looking forward to actually like playing some stronger of the teams. Sadly, they lost Benji. Apparently, that dude's cracked. It's from what everything I heard, but he ranked out. Unfortunate,
Ah.
but we'll see what they come with if they make it to quarters.
Yeah, I guess Bloom had that big kind of roster upgrade. I guess that was a few weeks ago now, right? But they have just been consistently performing since then. So really cool to see Bloom because they were kind of struggling the first half of the season, right? But
Yeah.
they've really turned things around. So that's been really cool to see. Uh, let's go ahead and move on now. You were mentioning already, Storm, the match between the Interbots and the Panthers. I did get to watch this one. I was on the call for this particular match. Taking a look at game number 1 here. And Storm, you were saying that there were some people that were trying to get some other people on top of some shoulders. Would you like to elaborate a little bit more?
So I think both games Striker played really well. Obviously, anytime a game's going past 30 minutes, unless you're playing into a very squishy team, it is really hard for Ezreal to like keep up with the damage of most crit 80 carries. It's just the nature of his kit. And then playing Pantheon, plus we're playing Renata and Abram. Not a lot makes sense here. And I think that's a good reason why PSN ends up taking this win. Clay able to get running with that Darius jungle that we've seen be super prevalent pretty much on every
Yeah.
division until Riot decides to learn how to balance the game again and nerf it to oblivion. The other thing to note is Nike Dragon this is her first week or their first week. I don't know the gender. We're gonna go with they.
Okay.
I don't remember.
Works for me.
Stepping back in spot of Loco. Game 1, 8-1 on Sivir
Yeah.
into a 80 carry like Striker is not bad. That is a really good performance. Obviously, I talked with Supporta a little bit, and he was really optimistic going into this game. Zelda guy going into this was like, "Oh, well, we 2-0 easy. It's fine. I don't have to worry about it," and that did not age well.
Yeah, no, I think Nike Dragon definitely had a great game here on the Sivir, and I thought the team played around Nike Dragon exceptionally well, also. But Frost, from a mid lane perspective, anything you want to add to the conversation here? Anything you want to comment on in regards to the Ari Victor matchup, or anything that's jumping out at you in this game 1 win screen?
I mean, game 1, it doesn't really doesn't look like neither of the mids had a whole lot of factor. I mean, Ari's good setup, so Ari's good at creating team fights, and Victor doesn't really create an advantage early in that lane, he's not able to do the damage that he wants in fights. So that's probably just the downfall of the cup that they had in game 1. And then game 2, I'm not sure. I mean, Zelda did all he could this game. Had nearly 50,000 damage on the Vel'Koz.
Yeah.
And just looks like it slipped away from him, in all honesty. 40-minute plus game just looks like it was decided by a final fight.
Pretty much. Yeah, it was definitely really crazy the second game. It was
We
looking like
both
the
cast that
Interbots
game,
were going to
right?
be able to. Were you? Was I with you, Storm? I thought I
Yeah,
was.
because it was when Launch's power got
Oh, that's
boot.
right. That's
Uh,
right. Yeah. That's
Dude,
why I
match
was not
MVP, give it to
remembering.
Mitonoxus. Holy. What are we drag
Yeah,
assaulting Mordekaiser into our Vel'Koz for?
that's right. Yeah. Yeah, because the fights leading up to that, right? Fresh Burger was like there was that one fight. Remember where he Mordekaiser ulted a Striker and just got
And just got
obliterated by
melted.
the Varus. Yeah, that was pretty wild. Yeah, I forgot I was casting with you for this one, Storm. That was a fun one.
That was a banger game,
Um,
too.
it
And by
definitely
banging, I mean I was
was.
beating my head into my desk, but yeah.
Yeah, like Frost was just saying, it definitely did end up coming down to that last fight pretty much, and Zelda guy definitely was doing a lot of work on that Vel'Koz. Anything especially interesting here for you, Novokaine? Anything you'd like to add about this win screen that you find especially interesting, or?
I mean, it was almost a 43-minute game, right? And Sibber
Uh-huh.
eventually just becomes the win con no matter what. So Nike had a really good game 1. Game 2, we're sitting 3, 4, and 12, but you get to all those items at the end, you're just murdering waves and pushing up with your team, making that able to move forward. So I think just showed they're able to hold on those longer games and pull out that win, right? Mordekaiser seemed to pop off. I didn't get to watch the game, so I'm literally just looking at stats. But when I looked from game 1 to game 2, it was also nice to see bot lane did a lot of work game 1, and then top seemed to come in and be able to handle that. So I'm I'm rooting for PSN as we go through playoffs. That's where my I'm gonna throw my bets in on, but I think
Okay.
they looked good, and I'm looking forward to see if they get through with the rest of the playoffs.
Yeah, absolutely. I believe, Storm, do you remember? I think Clay spent a decent amount of time in the early game actually getting Fresh Burger the lead on the Mordekaiser. Some jungle attention towards that. Am I remembering that right?
Uh, I don't think so. I
Oh,
think
okay.
Freshburger was just solo boloing people on repeat, if I remember.
Oh, yeah,
I
you could be right.
remember
Yeah.
at some point the Jarvan went top into with Gragas, and
Yeah.
Mordekaiser did not have
Oh,
ult,
yeah.
and then we're just watching bot lane fight, and then out of nowhere you see double kill Mordekaiser, and I went, his ult's still on cooldown. Wait, what? What
Yeah,
happened?
yeah. It was jungle attention from the other side
Yeah,
that helped Fresh Burger get his lead. That's
Get
what it
there, yeah.
was. Um,
that
but
is
yeah,
Darius cosplaying as an AP. Brother, stop walking topside.
for real. Yeah, definitely a pretty shocking loss for the Interbots, and they're going to need to bounce back heading into the postseason. Taking a look at our brackets now, we have for the play-in stage here in Crusader, we have got the Uncaged Bandits going to be going up against Bloom, that Bloom roster that's just been surging and performing so well here down the stretch during the back half of the regular season. And then the Interbots are also going to be into the play-ins. This is because they took that loss, right, Storm, last week, the 0-2. They went from second place all the way down into fourth, which means they don't get the bye into quarters, and they have to play this play-ins match against the Panda Fighters. So let's start there, Storm. What do you think of the Interbots' odds against the Pandas?
Um, this Panda Fighters team has went through at least 6 roster iterations now. If I had to take a random guess at how many
That's
times
a
it's
lot.
changed, um, I'm gonna be real. I think they lose. I think it's 2-0. The issue with this roster is like you have a lot of solid players, but every single player is weak side. Very
Hmm.
caution. Like he has a couple like good carry picks, but it seems like this team doesn't know how to play around a carry top side. Swedish Pancakes, I don't know anything about them. From what I've been told from hearing people talk about them being added to the roster was they won't run it down, is what I got told. And then
All right.
Squigs, I think, is the weak side goat of bot lane. But for some reason, this team just cannot figure it out from watching their games. Whereas
Yeah.
NOI, even though they've been having a bit of struggles, I think they're just mechanically better in this parts of the map where it's going to matter. I think Rutinium has a lot more of a roaming play style, but I'm also not sure if this Aerodactyl player has played at all yet either.
Hmm.
So maybe this
Interesting.
dude's crazy, and I don't know. Maybe this dude's crazy.
Maybe.
I could absolutely eat my shoe on this one, and NOI gets swept out. It wouldn't be the first time it happened to him in the playoffs. I don't know.
But as of right now, you are predicting the 2-0 for the bots.
That I am. That I am.
Okay. And then I assume you're predicting Bloom to take the win over the Bandits over there and the other play-ins match. You know, we've been pretty bullish on Bloom recently. Is that right, Storm?
Yeah, 100%. I like the expired bandits boys, Valentere, Dismal, and all them, but I think that Bloom roster is really good, and I don't think over the season the Bandits roster has gotten better. I think it's gotten worse, especially now with the jungle change.
Mhm.
So maybe Siphon comes back. She's still on the roster. Who knows? But
Maybe.
yeah, currently I would go Bloom.
Okay. I did goof a little bit, and I accidentally skipped the standings. I didn't check the whole chat before we jumped in here. But production, we can go back to the standings now if that works for you. Bish. Okay, perfect. So let's take a look at these standings for right now. The Sector 1 standings, we were already discussing earlier on, Storm, how your undefeated record has been tarnished, but there is currently an offer on the table to the amount of $5 to try
Crisp
and
5.
rectify that.
Crisp 5, Clobbery. Come on. The
That's right.
Venmo is on deck, brother.
He's got the tab open right now. But then also, of course, we were mentioning how the Interbots, this sort of fall from grace in the final hour, down from second into fourth. It does mean they are going to have to be playing that play-ins match. Any other notes here on Sector 1, Storm? Anything else that you feel like is important to mention?
Um, not overly. A lot of these teams are like where they should be. Shout out Elysium, I guess, for just FFing in the clown so that they didn't have to go into a gauntlet match. Um, I think the gauntlet would have been funny, but I get not wanting to play it. I don't mind speeding the playoffs up a little bit. Definitely doesn't, help us by any means. But yeah, no, I think this is about how I expected Sector 1 to play out. The only real change I would have made is I would have thought Interbots to end in that second or third. I really did not expect them to drop this match to PSN, but I also know Interbots well enough to know if it's a bad mental day, it's a bad mental day on that top roster. It's just the slight issue that team has.
That's back to our mental conversation again. But I want to jump over to you, Novocaine. Would you like to respond to Storm's assertion that the Snow Reapers are where they belong here in Sector 1?
Sorry, there we go. I think so. We had a lot of growing pains this season, right? So I think we had a lot of guys come in. We were learning. We were getting them together. There's a lot of things that happened that first season. The team's there, so I think for us it was coming in. Let's get it going, and then what do we need to learn from this season so that we can be ready for next year. I think there's a lot of strong competition on both sides of this sectors of these sectors. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think we unfortunately we landed where we probably should have this season, and again, hopefully that's the motivation for us to come back and hit it a little harder and change those placements as we go into next split.
Absolutely. Well, glad to hear you were able to take some learnings away from it, right? Very important. Novocaine, anything else you wanted to touch on for these standings in either of these sectors? Anything you feel like is worth highlighting?
So I would agree. I think Interbots win their playing game, but my concern is just how's your mental after you lose second place and now you have to play, right? And so now you've got to play an extra set a week versus being able to kind of just chill and watch what happens and work on draft. And then I think, like I said, I already called out PSN. I like where they're sitting. I think that can be kind of a high ride, right? You got to put somebody into play-ins, you're not there, and you're getting to kind of watch versus that. So I think interested to see how that rides out over the next couple weeks.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But taking a look at Sector 2 now, Storm, anything you'd like to touch on here? Anything that you feel like is especially surprising or noteworthy?
My only sad part of Sector 2 is I wish Elysium wouldn't have FF'd this game because now we have to play them in semis if we win. Don't get me wrong, if we want to win, we're going to probably have to play them either way, but it would have been a way more fun finals matchup.
Right.
But with them taking that FF, they tie with Syndicate. Syndicate's the one team they don't have head-to-head on in Sector 2 due to them being like the first week matchup when they didn't have their roster solidified. Goon Squad also dropping that game to Syndicate was tough. They're another team that I think that if they're on their peak, they're an insanely strong roster. But they've also just get into these weird funks where they don't trust who their players are, and they start picking things that if it was a different roster, like I'm gonna be real, they played like a Kale draft, and like if you're PSN, that draft's probably like all right, but you're not. You're Goon Squad. Please just play the things you're already good at. Why are we like chef cooking to oblivion? Like, bro, the pot is burned. Please just play what you're already really, really good at, and you guys are chilling. But
yeah. Comfort's so
I've got
important, right?
faith in the boys. I got faith in the boys in the Sector 2 side. Hopefully they can gauntlet their way through, and maybe we'll meet them in finals instead, since Elysium had to come kiss with us in semis.
Maybe. Yeah, obviously the Goon Squad did secure that top 3 finish, so they are going to get seeded directly into the quarters, and we'll be taking a look at those brackets in just a moment. But Novocaine, anything pertaining specifically to OSG Arctic here that you wanted to mention, or anything you wanted to add to the Sector 2 standings conversation?
I think this one for me is a lot tighter than I don't know. I think there's a lot that could interchange here, especially with some of the happenings of the last 48 hours, right? So some roster changes and things as we look at that. So um, for me, I'm watching Bloom, and uh, I agree with everything that Storm said. I don't really have anything too much to add. And then again, just shout out to the. I'll give a shout out to Arctic. They came in a little bit better record, right, by one game than
Yeah,
Reapers.
yeah.
So we've got that going for us, but still down there in that sixth slot, not where you want to see that end. So we'll make some changes and see what we do next split.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing how you guys are going to be able to bounce back. Thank you again, Frost. Yeah, Frost is going to be
Yep,
heading
thank you.
out.
Yeah, have a good one.
See you later. But let's now go ahead and jump over to taking a look at the quarterfinals here in Crusader. So, Storm, you are, of course, going to be waiting for the winner of the Bandits versus Bloom. So that is going to be actually, you were already sort of lamenting your possible semifinals matchup against Elysium, but honestly, it seems like you might have a pretty tough opponent here in the quarters as well. So, what are your thoughts there?
I think as I said earlier, I think Bloom 2O's expired bandits. I think this roster is definitely on the come up. The big concern I'll have for them is Cloudberry being moved from mid to support. I think Cloudberry had definitely started to show some real competence and like being a contestably good mid laner in Crusader, and now he's being moved to play support again to bring in Banana Man, who from the game screens I've seen has been playing insanely well. No shots at him. He's been playing very well. But I think that can moving a mid laner to support has its perks and it has its downsides. It's taking the mechanics of like solo lane players and being able to put them in support. I think gives you really strong laning, but it's a lot of the intrinsic things you miss out on by not playing support, like the fact your recall timers are completely different due to the fact you have to rotate on the map at completely different timers than you did before as a laner.
Yeah.
Same with you're constantly playing around your vision control and you're the one having to push the agenda. Your outcomes drastically change. But I've
Yeah.
also
Yeah.
been told apparently Cloud is originally a support main, so maybe I'm just eating my fucking shoe again. I don't know. But
There are. Oh, sorry, I didn't
who
mean to.
knows? Who knows? I think this roster is pretty good. I think the big impact, what will end up happening, will be Guster versus Feldy. I think Guster and Feldy both have drastically different jungle play styles. So I think it'll be very interesting to see who ends up like getting the front foot in their matchup.
Definitely. Could end up being very impactful. And, obviously jungle and support synergy as well. Something else that's talked about a lot, right? In terms of, being able to, both players, you need the strong foundation, right? To sort of build around for the rest of the team. Is for a lot of squads, that jungle and support are kind of the engine, right? That keep everything running. So definitely will be interesting to look out for. Novokaine, are there any quarterfinals here that you feel like you're especially excited about or interested in?
The Poison Panthers against Elysium, right? I'm curious
Hmm.
to see how that one goes. It is March Madness. I always like some underdog stories, so for me, that's the one I've landed on. Um, but I'll agree with everything else that Storm has said. There's some of the rosters I don't know that well. Just been kind of watching from how the games have played out themselves, but that's the one for me that I'm watching for, and I'll throw my hat out there for the underdogs to pick that one up.
How good do you think their odds are? If you're gonna put a percentage on it.
Uh, I'm gonna say 3-2, and I'm gonna say that, and I'm gonna give them like the 53%, right? Like I think it'll be tough.
Wow.
I think it's there, but that's my hopeful opinion as I watch that. So
Okay, so actually a little bit of faith in the Panthers to actually make that one competitive.
yeah.
So that'll be exciting to see if they are going to be able to make that happen. But our streamed match for the first round of playoffs here in Crusader is going to be the Interbots up against the Pandas. Going to be our featured battle here for the play-ins. Anything else? We've obviously discussed this a little bit already, but taking a look at the stats here, anything jumping out at you, Storm, or anything else that you wanted to comment on about this matchup?
Um, I, I kind of already summed it up a little bit earlier when we were talking. Obviously, team assists are much higher on the side of Interbots. This team just actually plays very well together, whereas Panda Fighters in a lot of their stream matches just kind of tends to randomly just get solo kills over and over, and then really has a struggle of translating that into any kind of lead.
Hmm.
Um, which I think will be their kind of biggest like nail in the coffin, like playing into NOI. Um, because don't get me wrong, NOI is going to int you kills occasionally,
That's in the
just
name,
what
right?
they
They're the
do
Interbots. Yeah.
for real. Um, but from time to time, I just think their team play overall is just better. I think they fight better as five, as long as someone's not on Gragas. Um, but I got to give it to the boys on this one. I've not seen a lot of convincing things from this Panda roster, but also maybe their add-ons are nuts, and I just don't know it yet. So, but
Yeah, maybe.
I'm gonna give it to the NOI boys on this one.
And I believe you were saying you're predicting the 2-0, right? For the bots. Did you say that
Yeah,
earlier?
yeah.
Yeah. Do you have a prediction, Novocaine, for this one, or anything about this stat sheet that you find especially interesting that you wanted to comment on?
So for me, it's going to be 2-0 bots. I think we
Mhm.
touched about it on some of these other stat sheets, but if you look at the average team vision a minute, much higher for Origins, right? So um, that just gives you more information so that you can do those things. They've got more dragons than their opponents. Um, more barons. Like that extra vision helps in all those situations. So
Yeah,
that's the only things I looked at that are a little different than Storm.
for sure. Yeah, significantly higher vision per minute actually for the Interbots. So I'm sure Cherry would be impressed. Shout out to Cherry. But Storm, giving you the last word, of course, for Crusader. Any other final thoughts on the Crusader regular season? Anything you wanted to reflect on, or any words of determination heading into these playoffs?
Um, not, I don't think there's like a ton to really go into on it. I think we covered a lot of it. I'm looking forward to playing the games. Obviously, expecting to see Bloom. Hoping for a good series. I'm hoping games are close. Obviously, for my sleep schedule, I'd rather 3-0 all of you because I want to go to bed. But we'll see what happens.
We'll see what happens indeed. But let's see what's going to be happening in the Warden League for this first week of playoff. Moving on to our last division that we do need to discuss. So this is a little bit interesting. There are actually a couple of Week 8 matches that still need to be played. So definitely not Lit versus Team Death Knights Blue is going to be happening tonight. And then on the 18th, so that is Tuesday, it's 2 days before the playoffs start here in Warden. We're going to be having the Kittens versus Mint Gaming, two teams that are right up there at the top of Sector 2. And the results of that will determine if there is going to be a gauntlet match here in Warden or not. So it's going to be a little bit difficult to dive too deep into the playoff picture, given that some things do still need to be determined. We also don't have a representative here from Warden this week, so we might be able to move through this last division just a little bit quicker. But Storm, taking a look at the results here from Week 8, the results that we do have in already, that is there anything here that you find especially interesting or that you'd like to make note of?
I think Tilt being able to take the series against Mint 2-1 is a pretty nice thing to see from Tilt. I know they lost a couple tough series, but I know both those Mint rosters were looking pretty strong going into this
Yeah.
later section. So I think it's really good that Tilt's starting to pick up some more of these wins, especially against these higher end teams, and should give them a little bit of momentum to go into the postseason.
Definitely, yeah. I think it had been a couple of rough weeks for Tilt. I don't remember exactly, but yeah, I know when we had Aurel on, this was several weeks ago now. At that point, things were looking really good for him. And then, sort of, unfortunately, joining us in the lounge ended up being a little bit of a curse for him, perhaps. They took a few losses after that, but able to turn things around here in week number 8, I think is looking fantastic for them. So glad to see they're able to pick up that win against it. What is a very formidable Mint roster, like you say. Those are our Vision Kings, of course, Mint Cryptic over there that they side of Tilt did manage to take down. Anything especially interesting here for you, Novokaine? I guess you didn't have a team in Warden this season, did you?
No, I don't have much to add here. I think for me it was difficult to keep up with everybody across the other 3 leagues. So
Yeah,
here
yeah.
I don't have too much to add.
Okay, well, let's go ahead and move on to our win screens that we do have. This was last week's streamed game between Definitely Not Aether and Contingent Orange. So this was a battle at the bottom between these two teams. Neither is going to be making it into the postseason, so I guess it's good that we got them on the stream when we had the opportunity. But you don't need to have any prior knowledge, Novocaine, to take a look at these win screens and comment on them. So taking a look at game number 1 here, we had Ploofy on the Belveth, 14-3-5 for DNL Aether, or DN, yeah, definitely not Aether, that helped them take this game 1 victory. Is there anything else in this game 1 win screen that's jumping out at you? Like jumping out
So
at me.
looking at that, right, we've got, mid lane seemed to come around pretty good too, right? Your Smith there. I'm looking at these. I'm assuming that's the Ziggs there, and just they seem to have a pretty good impact on the Immer Smith there on the Vel'Koz had pretty good impact to the game as well in game 1. But yeah, definitely Floofy looked like they did some work to make that one happen.
Yeah, I'm also noticing what seems to be a Shaco top from Goofy Boy
Yeah.
Joe. Um, he had the least gold in the game, but somehow almost did the most damage, only behind his Mel support. I have questions. I have a lot of questions. I might need to go back and watch this game. What are your questions, Storm? What are your thoughts?
I mean, it is Shaco top with double burn items
Uh-huh.
into a comp that is never gonna build a shred of MR.
Okay.
So the champ's gonna inherently just get a lot of free damage for no reason.
Uh-huh.
Because especially when you're at that lead, like you can tank walking into a Shaco box every once in a while and it not be a big deal. But that champion's damage numbers are just going to be inflated. But I'm gonna be real. This contingent orange draft makes no sense. You're playing a top laner that
Yeah.
wants to play to make you never interact with it by baiting you into interacting with it. You're playing an artillery mage, and then you're
With a no
playing
front line.
double rain like Jin Mel, who like sure you can outpoke in lane, but like that's all your lane does. And then you have Pantheon. What does
Uh-huh.
Pantheon do in this game besides run mid, burn flash on repeat and pray Ziggs has enough damage to follow up and kill something. Like that is your
Yeah.
only game plan this entire game.
Yeah, yeah. Doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to me either. So Contingent Orange obviously taking the loss here in this first game, but they did, of course, manage to come back and win the best of 3. So taking a look at game number 2 now, where Contingent Orange were able to equalize the series at 1. This draft is looking like it makes a little bit more sense. You know, we do have a Z top this time, which was also a little bit unorthodox, but it seems like it worked out quite a bit better than the Shaco.
Well,
Yeah.
I think our question gets answered though. I think that Shaco was bottom side, was it not? Because Goofy Boy's on Recon here.
Well, the Shaco
Or did
did
they
not
swap?
have the support item in that game 1 win screen. It
Okay,
was
so
the
they
Mello who had
just
the
role
support
swapped
item.
in games 2 and 3.
Oh, I suppose. Yeah, you're right. A good catch there, Novokaine. Yeah, we do have some players in some different roles, it seems, for Contingent Orange between these games.
They're so here vibing.
Yeah.
Yeah, because Beards went top that game. Funky went jungle. Then Astro went. They're out here vibing. Holy.
Yeah. Did they all switch roles? Oh no, Astro Smash played AD carry both games. But that is the only member of Contingent Orange, I think, that played the same role in game 1 and game 2. That
Yeah.
is so
Yeah.
crazy.
And then Astro stayed 80k for 2 and 3. With Beards swapped to top, and then someone else and Funky went to jungle. But
Well, Astro definitely
a
had a
little
good game on the
goofy.
Kaisa in this one. It's a little goofy. It's a little goofy. Um, you know, on the side of definitely not Aether, as Cheese Blaze had 10 kills on the Urgot, but 14 deaths, unfortunately, which just seems like it was probably too many deaths to actually end up taking the win. And interesting to see that
Yeah.
the Shaco changed sides. So Shaco 0 and 2 at this point in the series.
Dude, it was too good. I had to get rid of it again.
I
I
guess
also
so.
don't understand how Urgot like ever actually dies to Zed.
I
Ever.
don't know. I don't know. I don't
You're
have
like
the
he ults
answers.
you E backwards immediately and beat the brakes off that champion, but what do I know?
Well, yeah, I'm a bit mystified as well. Let's just go ahead and move on to game number 3. So yeah, Astro Smash, as you already mentioned, AD carry again here. Did they keep some of the other same rules since they won game 2? No, it looks like they switched things up again. Yeah, Funky Boy Joe went into the jungle this time, which is the same, similar to game number 1. Funky Boy Joe was in the jungle.
The one thing I will say that's interesting about this draft is like drafting something like the Twitch and going a Yunthal build while you have Rengar is a little weird when you start pairing it with Brand. Um, I could be delusional, and maybe Brand's like a goated pick into Renata. I don't play bot lane, not my expertise by any means.
Hmm.
But like normally Twitch wants like some kind of like either Vanguard type tank to play in front or an enchanter.
Right.
So the fact that like Astro comes out of this game 15 and 5 with no help, because this
Yeah.
comp does not help him. It just dives while he's also playing into Ghost Darius, Talia, and just
Seriously.
praying Jinx never catches a reset. I think props to him. Don't get me wrong, Twitch plays from like 2 screens away in most team fights, but either way, that's still really good
Mm-hmm.
score line to be able to produce in that kind of when you're given that much reliability, I guess.
Yeah. Did get out damaged by his support there. Goofy Boy Joe's Brand topping out the damage charts for the team. But obviously, we know that Brand is another one of those champions where those numbers can get a bit inflated. But yeah, I feel like for the Twitch in particular, it feels like a difficult draft to play against as well on the side of definitely not. You know, with the Darius and the Jax posing a lot of threat. Uh, and yeah, so really interesting. I imagine that this was probably a situation where Contingent Orange were able to snowball the game pretty early on, because this is definitely one of those drafts, a lot of champions where like if they get an early lead, they can tend to snowball pretty hard. So that's my theory, anyways. Do you have a theory, Novocaine? Any thoughts on this game 3 win screen or on any
I
of
mean, I
these
think
other?
if you're definitely Aether, there comes a point in that game where Talia, Jinx, and Renata just don't get to play the game right because Rengar's going to one-shot them if you're not paying attention. So I think that was pretty tough if you're sitting on the squishy side of that matchup. But yeah, no, I agree. The front line wants to go in, and Twitch and Brand are standing back there like, please don't get at me, Darius, which it doesn't look like he got to do that either, even with Ghost Flash. So, no, interesting draft, but they definitely snowballed early on that one.
Yeah, very interesting drafts for Contingent Orange in particular, but cool to see that they did end up picking up the win there. Taking a look at the standings, obviously, as previously mentioned, there are some matches that still need to be played, so these standings are not actually finalized just yet. But taking a look at Sector 1 here, we do obviously know all of our playoff teams. We gave Cherry that shout out earlier. She is sitting at the top of Sector number 1 here, 6-2 for Dorado Gaming Kai. And then the Death Knights and Definitely Not Lit going to be determining their seeding based on the results of that match that's going to be played tonight. Anything especially interesting here for you, Storm?
Props to Cherry being able to hang out in the top of that leaderboard. Obviously, I don't know how much of this changes with the matchups that haven't been played yet. Honestly, I don't think it's gonna overly matter for at least Sector 1. For the most part, I think these teams are right where they belong. I know Akuma's been dealing with a little bit of roster shuffles last time I checked or heard, so maybe that team comes out better or worse on the other end. Who knows? But either way, I think it should play in for a pretty eventful postseason for Warden this year.
Absolutely, yeah. The standings here, particularly the top 3 teams in this first sector, ended up being really, really close down the stretch. So I am expecting a really exciting playoff bracket as well. Let's go ahead and take a look at Sector 2 also. So the match that still needs to be played over here, as previously mentioned, going to be Mint with Y Gaming, is going to be going up against the Kittens in a couple of days to determine if we are going to have that 3-way tie at 6 wins that would necessitate the gauntlet being played here for this week, this Thursday. So we'll stay tuned, guys, for that one. But anything else here that you feel like is especially noteworthy, Storm?
I hope they play the Gauntlet. I think Gauntlet's
You want the
fun.
gauntlet? Yeah, you were
Crusader's
deprived of the gauntlet over
lame,
there in Crusader, yeah.
but
So-
it also it benefits us that it didn't happen in Crusader. It's just still fun to watch it happen. I'm always for more games.
Totally. Yeah, that'll be really interesting. And again, same story as Sector number 1. A lot of teams really, really closely matched, it seems, here in Sector number 2 as well. So should be really exciting to see who does manage to come out on top in the end. Taking a look at the play-ins portion of the playoff bracket now. So this, let's see here. So the Death Knights and Definitely Not Lit, they may change places depending on the results. So obviously, that's how the play-ins work. As the number 4 team from one sector faces the number 5 team from the other sector. So the fact that Team Death Knights Blue and Definitely Not Lit still have to determine who's 4 and who's 5 makes sense. That's going to be what is still up in the air. So I don't know if we can really say anything about this, honestly, given the fact that we don't actually know if these are going to be the matchups that are going to be played or not. But Storm, anything you wanted to comment on about this, or should we just move ahead to the quarters?
I hope my boys at Tilt win.
Shout out to Tilt. Shout out Aurel.
Shout out the only Warden scrim we ever had. The goat.
Very nice. Taking a look at the quarterfinals now. Again, there is a lot still up in the air here. This could be exactly what the bracket looks like, or this could be nothing at all what the bracket is going to look like. We're just not sure quite yet. So again, probably not really too much that we can say here. And we don't really have stats either. We don't even know who the teams are that are going to be streamed for this. We don't even know if the gauntlet is going to be happening or not just yet. So I guess that's going to pretty much do it for our coverage of the Warden. We don't even have a representative here to give any last words. So
Who has to lose for the Gauntlet to happen?
that would be yes.
Ayo, Mint, $5. Sprint it, brothers.
confirmation for production there for the benefit of stream who can't hear. It's the Kittens who need to take down Mint with a Y in order to reach 6 wins and create that 3-way tie in Sector 2.
Run it down. Run it down. Run it down.
Is there a reason that you asked specifically Novokaine, or you're just curious?
I think that was Storm that asked that one, but
Oh, it was you that
he
asked.
wants to
Oh.
see this gauntlet to happen. So
Right. My mistake there. But yeah, it was Storm. You just wanted to see the gauntlet, right? That's the only reason why you're
Oh yeah,
curious.
that's the only reason.
Yeah,
I think it's
for
fun.
sure. Well, guys, I think that is going to do it for this episode of the Top Hat Lounge. We'll just do some shout outs now. Storm, coming to you first, of course. Your shout outs, please.
Shout out my team having to deal with me. Shout out LXC admins for not mental booming everything. After having to
Just
watch
deleting the
all of
server, like,
that,
we're done.
yeah, after watching all that burn, I would have smacked somebody. I was annoyed for them, and I feel bad that a little bit of I don't even want to say it was us, but like we were incorporated into it a little bit. But we're all happy campers now. We're all gaming, hopefully. But shout out my goats.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that was handled by everybody on the league side, on the admin side, as good as possible, right? It's just unfortunate, the fact that it was such a minor thing, right, that just snowballed into so much more is pretty annoying. But like you said, we've pretty much got that sorted out now, I think. So good shout out there, Storm. But we do need some shout outs from you, Mr. Novokaine, as well.
I'd like to shout out to Tacos, our Silent, Materium, and Dorsky for running the OSG teams this split. So thanks for all the work and getting everybody out there and getting us in. Thanks to the admins for all the help in doing that and for their support throughout the season, and to what was said that nobody completely boomed yesterday and the hours before that. So, and then thanks for having me on the podcast today.
Absolutely. It was great to have you, Novokaine. Thank you guys very much. Everybody, do not forget the Arbiter League playoffs continue tomorrow night. You know where to be and you know when to be there. From us here in the lounge, thank you very much for watching. Have a good one. We'll see you next time.